in a rather interesting spot, to say the least. I think coming up here, we marveled at the beauty, the natural beauty, the low humidity. For those of you from Louisiana and Washington, D.C., probably appreciate that more than the rest of us. And Fiji, okay, fair enough. But we're also not to look at this just simply as, wow, what lovely climate, what lovely stones. But this really is a spot where we're to take heed, as Paul writes in 1 Corinthians. And there he says in 1 Corinthians 10, "Now these things happened to them as an example, but they were written down for us, for our instruction, on whom the end of the ages has come. Therefore let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape that you may be able to endure it." A guy that I always appreciated, that was one that some of us know rather well still, is Jim Blau. And I remember years ago when I was a young minister and things were going just awful in every possible way, of Jim, who was such a good listener. Remember what he was such a good listener. But I remember him listening to everything that I shared, and then him kind of giving me a kind of a embrace of encouragement and saying, you know what, don't feel bad. You're not a total failure here. At least you can be used as an object lesson for others. And thus, Dan is exactly that for us today. And it's helpful to remember that as the tribes were finding their places and all were going to their allotted spots, that God had bestowed his favor on Israel, not because they were the most numerous, not because they were the most righteous, and then I love the aside, because you're not, but rather, I just bestowed my favor upon you because I love you. And with that love should come then a reciprocal trust in the Lord. And to know that if you ever think that it's going to be by your own power, you're going to be sadly mistaken. And God will have to chastise them and us again and again as soon as we think that on our own steam, there is anything that really we can accomplish. And challenging things in particular is where this matters most. We're not talking about the everyday mundane things where it's like, oh, I've really got to depend on God here, but on the challenging things. But the challenging things is what makes life la dolce vita, right? It's what gives the zest of life. When Jesus says, I'm going to give you life and give it to you the full. When he says to the rich young ruler, you're going to get 100 times as much. And with them, persecutions, right? I mean, that's like, wow, we're really living. But think of this. Where do you have to buy the expedited pass at Disney World? For the teacup ride? No, it's for the thrill rides. The wild, crazy thrill rides. And even though they're dangerous and they're meant to cause you to panic, you still trust in those Virginia Tech engineers who put the hard work into making sure that that thing is going to bring you home at the end with excitement and the need to buy a $15 picture, apparently, at the end of that to prove that you were on it. Why, though? Because, you know, we have within us all, a fellow wrote a book years ago who says, you know, within every person is this idea that we're meant to have an adventure to live, a battle to fight, and the distress to rescue. We're not, as Thoreau said, meant to live lives of quiet desperation. There's meant to be challenge in our lives. It's what brings the character to our own lives. But the Danites who ended up here really ended up here based on a couple passages. I'm going to read a couple, but then I'm going to ask you to join me in just a moment. One that let me just reference to you is in Judges 1. There it says the Amorites who would be then the people that the Danites were trying to knock out of the land, says the Amorites pressed the people of Dan back into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come down to the plain. Now, what do you mean down to the plain? Where's the plain around here? What happened in that case? They weren't here. They weren't here doing that. When God in his sovereignty and in his love, which he bestowed on all of Israel and all of the tribes, looked at them, he also in his sovereignty allowed the lots to fall in such a way that God decided where each of the tribes would have their settlement. And for the tribe of Dan, it says, and this is Joshua 19, the seventh lot came out for the tribe of the people of Dan, according to their clans. And the territory of its inheritance included Zorah, Eshtaol, Ir Shamash, Shalaban, Ajalan, Ithla, Elan, Timnah, Ekron, Eltekeh, Gibbethon, Baalath, Jehud, Benakerbereg, Gathrimon, Mejarkon, Rakan, with the territory over against Joppa. Anybody remember where Joppa is? Do you have a sense of direction that we're near Joppa right now? No. Joppa is way down the coast. Way down. It's south of where we were in Caesarea. We were in a bus for hours. We're a far way away from where they were. God, in his wisdom, bestowed upon Dan a difficult thrill ride. And it was to go take that territory. But when you do, and you rely on me, ha ha ha, la dolce vita, right? That's the sweet life to the full. You're going to know what you were always meant to be and to do together, relying on me. But instead of that, they had another plan. And the basic lesson here that we have, and if you want to have a title for this, it is compromise kills. But here's the sadness. Compromise kills, but not right away. That's the frightening part about compromise. In Judges 18, go ahead and turn over to there. We pick up on the Danites in verse 1. In those days, there was no king in Israel. That usually means that the people were doing whatever they thought best. That's the refrain. And in those days, the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. For until then, no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah, from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. Seems like they're doing that almost to kind of recreate that whole Numbers 13 scene, right? Let's go spy out the land. Let's go see how it's doing. Is it a good land? Is it fortified? What's going on there? So they said, go and explore the land. And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of a young Levite. And they turned aside and said to him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here? It would have been odd for a Levite to have been up in that area at the time. Something very strange went on with that Levite. You can read the backstory on that guy, by the way, and nothing really fantastic about him other than compromise occurs for one who would be set apart by God to be one chosen to serve God in the honor that is bestowed to a Levite. Verse 5, and they said to him, inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed. And the priest said to them, hold on a second while I go inquire. Oh, wait, it doesn't say that. And the priest said to them, go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord. All right, here is one of the classic examples of compromise that we've got in our sight right here. And it's one that maybe hits all too familiar to us because it's probably hitting home for us in a variety of different ways in our life. You know how that kind of works. It's like there's something that you want to do that you know is really what you want to do. And it really is kind of born out of maybe your own desires. Maybe it's, you know what, I wonder if this is from the Lord. I just got a job. It's outside of really where our fellowship is meeting. It'll mean about an hour and 15-minute commute, but I am making twice as much, but houses cost half as much, and there's really good soccer leagues for our kids out there, and the schools are really good for our kids. Must be from the Lord. Let me package this in just such a way when I ask that one person who's already in a compromised state some advice about this, where it would be, imprudent for them to say anything but, go in peace. The Lord is with you. And then, my goodness, sure, compromise kills, but not right away. But come back and talk to them about marriage and their kids 10 years hence, and you see the effects of something like that. We'll see it. We'll see it right here with what happens with Dan along this journey. Verse 7, then the 5 men departed, came to Laish, this great fortress that was here, came to Laish and saw the people who were there, how they lived in security after the manner of the Sidonians. Tyre and Sidon is just north of here, but these Sidonians are far afield from Tyre and Sidon. These are untethered, disconnected Sidonians without a supply line of support. After the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting. This sounds more like the teacup ride, really, than the Matterhorn. Lacking nothing that is in the earth, possessing wealth, how they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. And when they came to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, the brothers said to them, what do you report, spies? They said, arise, we'll be like Caleb and Joshua here. Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. Does that sound reminiscent by any way to you? It's interesting that Eshtaol sounds very, very close even to the great bunches of grapes that were there in the promised land. I could imagine them seeing like, yes, we are so faithful. We're just like Caleb. We have a different spirit than the rest of them. Look at the greatness that we're doing. It's so easy to read our own press clippings, to buy our own self-affirmations in the midst of compromise and not even realize how far we have drifted. Arise, let us go, he says. And it's very good. And will you do nothing? Do not be slow to go. Now they're kind of like really kind of appealing to your machismo at this point. Will you do nothing now that we faithful ones have reported to you what it is that you should do? Do not be slow to go, to enter in and possess the land. As soon as you go, you will come to an unsuspecting people. The land is spacious, for God has given it to your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is in the earth. So 600 men of the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah, Eshtaol, went up and encamped at Kiriath Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Mahaden, and to this day, behold, it is west of Kiriath Jearim. And they passed on from there up now to the hill country of Ephraim, and on their way up, they then come to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to scout out the country of Laish said to their brothers, do you know that in these houses there is an ephod? An ephod would have been something, it looks like clothing, but it's made out of probably metal in some cases. It's a vest or vestment by which you could try to divine the will of the Lord. Do you know that there is an ephod? 17? 14? Oh, I'm way down. Okay, thank you. That there is an ephod, household gods, and a carved image and a metal image. Wow, Yahtzee, right? I mean, you're hitting all of the marks that you want to have here if you really want to compromise all the way. Hey, what better way to start our great work in the Lord than with this? Now, therefore, consider what you will do. They turned aside there, came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah, asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to scout out the land went up, entered, took the carved image, the ephod, the household guards, the metal image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with the 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, the metal image, the priest said to them, what are you doing? And they said to him, shut up, we're going to hook you up, basically is what they say. All right, keep quiet, put your hand over your mouth, come with us, be to us a father and a priest. Isn't it better for you to be a priest? Is it better for you to be the priest of a man or to be the priest of a tribe and a clan in Israel? One as wonderful as we are. And the priest's heart was glad. Hey, he was selfishly ambitious. Why not? There was nothing that was mooring him to the Lord at this point. And when self and religion get mixed up in the way, suddenly you think, hey, I just got called to go lead a much bigger church. Surely it's the Lord's will. Surely that's what it is to really serve the Lord right now. Who cares about the good shepherding that's required of this flock where God has placed me? Look what I get to do. Oh, my goodness, God is so good. So they turned and departed, putting the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them. When they had gone a distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house called out. They overtook the people of Dan, and they shouted to the people of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you, that you come with such a company?" And he said, "You take my gods that I made and the priest and go away? And what have I left?" That's his silver. It's his gold. It's his investment that they just took. Micah, the guy, by the way. Micah connected with that Levite. Do not let your... Oh, and this is what the people say to him. "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you and you lose your life with the lives of your household." I wish there was like a street version of that passage right there, because it would basically say, how dare you even come here and you're going to buck up on me? Don't be silly. You're going to go down if you in any way think that you can in any way impede or challenge us. And, isn't that the sadness of when we end up in a place of compromise? That rather than really being willing to talk things out with someone that's maybe even trying to, intervene, even though they have selfish motives in this case, but it's so easy to go into bully mode at that point. So easy to go into manipulation mode. Rather than having a discussion, because we're clearly stealing your stuff right now, rather than have a discussion because you're clearly asking me, let's say in a more modern sense, you're clearly asking me to deny myself, take up my cross and follow Jesus. You're clearly asking me to actually trust in God and in the body of Christ, rather than actually have a discussion on that. You know what I'm going to do instead? I am instead going to manipulate and tell you that I have no reason whatsoever to want to hear what it is that you're trying to say. Whether it's kind of hiding behind, well, I've been hurt, or I've seen things, or I know better, but one way or another, rather than having that dialogue, it's shut down when we're in a place of compromise. And so they are. Verse 26, then the people of Dan went on their way with their stuff, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned back and he went back home. But the people of Dan took what Micah had made, the priests who belonged to him, and they came to, Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, struck them down with the edge of the sword, burned the city with fire, and there was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It was the valley that belongs to Beth-rehob. Then they rebuilt the city and lived in it. A beautiful valley, flowing, green, bucolic, beautiful. And they named the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their ancestor, who was born in Israel. But the name of the city was Laish first. And the people of Dan set up the carved image for themselves. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses. Does somebody else have a different phrase right there? And what version are you reading? Yeah, the NASB, many of the other versions have different early manuscripts that inform you of who it was that Gershom was the son of. And he was, in fact, so Jonathan, who was the one that was perpetrating some of this and setting up the carved image, the one that was setting up the carved image was the grandson of Moses. But it's so embarrassing that early scribes, I think, wanted to inject something other than Moses right there to see how quickly a people could compromise, even one so closely connected to Moses himself. And so many of the early scribes put in Manasseh as if to mitigate the shame that would have been associated with putting up this carved image. So, verse 31, they set up Micah's carved image that he made as long as the house of God was in Shiloh. We also know that later in 1 Kings, when Jeroboam is rising to power, that he is worried that the people will come to their senses and only want to follow God. And as a result, he thinks, you know what? I need to make it expedient. I need to make it convenient for the people to worship God. And it's going to be really inconvenient for them to have to go down to travel all the way to Jerusalem for that. And you know what? So I'm going to make it easy for them. And not even that, but if they go to Jerusalem, then maybe they'll actually be infected with orthodoxy. God forbid that that's the case. So let me set up an image in two places that would make it easy for people. I'll do, and what two places would be strategically convenient, but also people that would be willing to house such an abomination as a golden calf which is a worship of Baal, which is a corruption of our God, what place would maybe be receptive to that? Who could I actually land this with? Oh, I know who. The compromisers. Dan. And so one here, of course, in Dan, and the other in Bethel. And those two are repeated 12 times. It's called the sin of Jeroboam. It's a refrain throughout all of the early kingdom, that the sin of Jeroboam was the anathema that marked and polluted and corrupted. It was a dumpster fire of accreditation that was given to the people of God. And that sin of Jeroboam is this. This is the altar. That would have been the idol right up there. You're sitting right in between the two right now. You are in a filthy, nasty, evil place of compromise. And it is an awful one to say the least. 12 times that this is given to us. But I think for us, we need to kind of take a really hard look right here. And this is a great place for us to, again, heed the warning of 1 Corinthians 10. These things were all set out for us, not for no reason. These things have all been excavated for us, not for no reason. These things have been set out for us. Why? To be an example, so that we would heed their lesson, 1 Corinthians 10. And I think as we look at this for ourselves, we've got to look at, has any compromise come into your Christianity? Because compromise kills. Compromise kills discipleship, but on the other hand, discipleship kills compromise. And which is the path that we're going to take? That we decide all the more to really get back to what is lordship of Jesus Christ in my life. Not just in the areas that are religious. What is lordship of all of my life?
Come on.
All my ambitions and allegiances and affections, all of my agenda. If I had another A word, I would include it right now. But all of that, what is it that Jesus needs to be Lord over? And if there has been any bit of that where we have compromised, well, while we sit here right now, let us decide that I'm going to allow discipleship, the lordship of Jesus, to kill that compromise. Otherwise, that foothold of Satan, that compromise, is looking to kill discipleship. And at the end of the day, that we could be not like the rich young ruler who is given this path of glory and excitement and persecution, but like the disciples who said, hey, we gave up everything. What do we get? And what do they get? You get 100 times as much. When you trust in the Lord, think of what the Danites could have had. Think of what it is that could have been their glory instead of this compromise. And by the way, by being the compromise, guess who they are? They are the front edge of every bit of destruction that comes to Israel. Everything comes from the north, sweeps through here, and Dan is obliterated first. Dan is absolutely crushed by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, everyone that comes in to chastise Israel. Dan is the first in line to receive full frontal chastisement from the hand of God through his vehicles. And again, I would rather make this decision myself rather than let it be through the humbling of God. Let it be that this is an exciting time of refreshment that comes from repentance as we have obliterated, torn down the high places, torn down any sort of compromise that exists in our life, to walk anew, fresh and excited in the great statement that Jesus is Lord. Amen. Amen.